our guest is Adam Nedeff, and he has a brand new book that just came out, the day we're recording. This is going to come out on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, which is perfect because everybody knows the day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday.
It literally just came out to the point that I don't have a copy in my hands. So I'm going to pantomime holding up the book, and in post, what you can do is just edit in the cover of that book. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're completely inept, so we'll put in a picture of a melon or something,
But Mike, this book is about one of the greatest game show hosts of all time, Mr. Monty Hall.
Monty Hall.
Yeah. Adam, how did you get involved with this?
It's actually kind of an interesting story and a bittersweet story. A very good friend of mine named Bob Bowden, who was my boss a few years ago. I was working on a show called Funny You Should Ask, which Bob would probably appreciate if I mentioned. It is still seen weekdays in syndication. Check your local listings.
Okay.
But I was working on that show. And Bob had formed a very close relationship with Monty Hall and his family. Bob was an executive at Game Show Network at the time that they secured the deal to get the rights to the Let's Make a Deal rerun package. And he was the executive who oversaw that. And so he formed a very good relationship with Monty Hall, and they got to be very close towards the end of his life. And at the time Monty passed away, Bob asked me if I'd like to come to the funeral. And I had no relationship at all with Monty Hall or his family, but it was Monty Hall, and here I am, a game show fan and somebody who's been able to form a career in game shows. So, I'll go down there and pay my final respects. So I went down there.
You went to Monty Hall's funeral.
I attended Monty Hall's funeral.
Okay.
And it was kind of a surreal experience. I remember I made it a point to sit in the back row because I'm like, I didn't know the guy, and I don't want to feel like I'm horning in on this. So I made it a point to sit in the back row. And then I remember at the end of the funeral, everybody sitting in the back row except me gets up and walks out of their seats. And I was like, oh, is this some sort of ritual that I don't know about? And I realized that they're going over to a bunch of the other guests to tend to them. I was the only person in the back row who wasn't there as a hired caretaker.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's a little awkward.
Monty's friends have all lived very long lives, it turns out. It was a lovely funeral. It was a lovely service. And then at the end of the service, and this is something I didn't know about Jewish tradition because I was raised Catholic and I was nowhere near Jewish tradition, but I found out it's a tradition to leave the mound of dirt and leave a shovel out and just have the guests bury the body. So I was asked, do you want to bury Monty Hall? And I nodded my head, and it ended up being really kind of a powerful experience because you go from being a little kid sitting on the floor and watching this guy in a plaid suit hand out money to people in Halloween costumes.
Now you're chucking dirt on him.
To writing books and making a career of the thing that you always loved when you were a kid, and now you're burying him. So that was kind of a startling experience. And then the next step that happened was Bob floated the idea of me writing a book about Monty Hall. Monty had written a memoir in 1973. He had written an autobiography. There's a difference between an autobiography and a memoir. He wrote an autobiography.
I'm going to ask you the difference, but not right now.
We'll come back to that. Yeah. If you folks at home, we can actually make a game out of this. What is the difference between an autobiography and a memoir? The answer is coming later in the podcast. Now,
good.
Some may pronounce it memoir.
Some people don't. Yeah.
And autobiography.
And so Bob had floated the idea, and Monty had written an autobiography in 1973 along with a co-author / ghostwriter, Bill Libby, who was predominantly a sports writer and sports biographer. And Monty had written this book and gotten it published at the time, and he had made it known at the time that he wasn't happy with it because he had turned in an 800-page manuscript to the publisher, and then the published book was about 300 pages. So the way Monty Hall put it was, they released the Reader's Digest version of my life.
Right.
And the other thing that happened was Monty lived an incredibly long time. Monty lived another 46 years after he had written his autobiography. More years of adult life followed that autobiography than preceded it. Monty lived an incredibly long time and did a lot more stuff. And there were things that were significant in his life that hadn't even happened yet at the time the book was published. So in a way, it was kind of incomplete. Also, his son at one point, because I interviewed his children, I did new interviews with his children for this version of the book. One of the things that his son brought up was it captures my dad at a really specific point in his life. It's a point in Monty's life where he was looking to do stuff other than Let's Make a Deal. And if you read this book, the original book from 1973, you come away with the impression that Monty kind of hates the show. That's not the image that he wanted to set out at all. It was very unintentional, and it was tied to the fact that Monty, at the time the book was published, had been doing it for 9 years and wanted to give acting a try and wanted to try other things.
Right.
So you get this vibe from the book that he's not happy with Let's Make a Deal, and his children made it clear. And no, that's not it at all. Our dad loved the show. Our dad was proud of the show. So it was an incomplete picture of Monty Hall in the long run because he ended up living such a long time. And also it wasn't the most accurate depiction of Monty because it captured him at this really precise point in his life. Mm-hmm. So a new book was merited. What I found out very early on was the publisher didn't hold the copyright. The publisher, the rights to the book were held by Monty himself and his co-author, Bill Libby, which meant that to do a book, all I needed to do was to secure permission from their heirs. Monty's children granted me permission, and then I was able to hunt down Bill Libby's children through social media and got their permission. So his children and both of their children are going to be getting some
coin off of this.
Some coin off of this. Let me start that sentence over again. As long
royalties, I believe.
Royalties, yes.
So Monty's
some
children,
some shekels. Is that some clams?
Monty's children and Bill Libby's children will both be receiving some portion of the royalties from this book, in addition to me.
Yeah, I noticed that, you have third billing on this, which, I mean, you didn't have to. I thought that was admirable. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I figured Monty Hall by Monty Hall would sell more copies than Monty Hall by Guy. So, but to be clear about what the book is, it is the full text of the original 1973 book, to which I've added new research and new interviews. I would say to any game show fans out there who happen to own Monty Hall's old biography, the book that I've just released is 60% new material. So awesome. You're getting your money's worth if you buy my book.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's his book plus all the stuff.
Plus a whole lot of new research, a whole lot of new interviews. I conducted.
I didn't know if you went in and did like a Peter Jackson director's cut.
Well, I was going to say, if I may, it's like the Lord of the Rings, and then you're coming in with the Silmarillion.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm here all night.
Yeah, this is the Silmarillion of Monty Hall books.
So I have a question I've been wanting to ask Adam all night. So, Adam, you've written one or more books.
I mean, you've written like...
This is number 10.
10, yeah.
This is number 10 that just came out, yeah.
Is that hard?
Good question, Mike.
People inquiring,
Good question.
It's incisive.
Where do you get your ideas?
I mean...
Yeah. There's some challenge to it. One of the difficulties is people that you want to talk to, but it's very difficult to track them down sometimes. Or there are some people that just aren't comfortable giving interviews, so they say no. And it has nothing to do with the subject of your book. It has nothing to do with anything about what you're doing. It's just they aren't comfortable giving interviews. They aren't comfortable talking, or they don't trust their own memories.
Yeah.
So that can be difficult sometimes. And sometimes it's a matter of the research material that's available. Game shows were not treated with the greatest amount of respect in the old days. It's been very nice to see kind of this generational change in television critics, where we now have TV critics who have their own opinions and they love stuff and they hate stuff, as all generations of critics have. But you have TV critics now who are willing to say, wait a minute, I actually did like game shows. But game shows were this popular whipping boy for TV critics for years and years and years. So they weren't covered so much in depth at the time. So that limits the amount of research that you have to draw from. You kind of have to pick and choose things. It's funny having to pull up facts from critics who just hated the shows. This piece of information that I have about Let's Make a Deal comes from somebody who just Well, I mean, I'll tell you my favorite newspaper column that I stumbled upon, and I don't remember the writer's name, but there was a newspaper columnist who wanted to write a column about how just game shows are so beneath her. And so she devoted an entire day to just watching game shows and taking notes on her thoughts on each one. And the gist of it is, these contestants are stupid and these games are so puerile. And this is just so classless. I can't believe I'm watching these things. They're such garbage.
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
The thing that gets me is the contestants are so dumb. How are they not getting the answer to this? I knew the answers to all these questions. I hate these game shows because the contestants are idiots. And one of the points that she makes is when she comes to her review of Hollywood Squares, she mentions that she didn't understand the game because a Jehovah's Witness knocked on the door at the start of the show, so she missed the first 2 minutes.
Well,
so this woman wrote a half a page about how game shows are beneath her because she's too smart for them. In the middle of telling us that she's too smart for game shows, she's telling us that 28 minutes wasn't enough time for her to figure out how Hollywood squares.
I'm going to use the Jehovah's Witness defense.
There was I don't remember where it was, but there was a girl who live tweeted. She went to see the Avengers Endgame with her sister, and her sister had not seen any of the previous movies. And she kept saying, "Well, who is this guy, and why is he? Why does he turn invisible? And how come he's giving him back a shield? Why does he have a shield in his trunk?"
Here's the thing.
That's God.
That's why I can't get into superhero movies. I got an AMC pass. Now that my whole world is wide open, I can finally see whatever movies I feel like, even if it's something I wouldn't have seen before. So I decided to see some Marvel movies. And what I realized is all Marvel movies assume that you have seen all other Marvel movies.
Yeah, they're connected.
And it's
you've got to watch. You've got to watch them all.
And it's like I'm not going to do 20 movies worth of homework to see your movies.
Okay, well, Adam, it's been nice having you on the show.
Well, no, hold on. Well, I understand what Adam is saying, but there are people who's like, who has time to watch 20 movies? You know what? I watched like one in one weekend, and then the next weekend we watched another one. And over the period, because we had seen 5 or 6 or 8 of them or whatever over the period of a year, we got caught up before Infinity War came out.
Well, I'm glad we brought up Marvel movies because I was going to use that to illustrate. I mean, my question was stupid.
Yes, it was,
but it wasn't. It wasn't entirely stupid because I do have a point behind that. Believe it or not, because I think it's important for people to have a creative outlet. And this is my creative outlet.
Mine
this
too.
is Darren's creative outlet. But we get to it up nightly or weekly, and then we start over again. It's like we get to sit back down and say, okay, this is going to be a good podcast. And then it is or it isn't. And then we just keep going like that. But when you're writing a book, I've got to imagine, and I don't know if it's different because you're doing basically nonfiction. You're writing about things that actually happen. So you're almost like, almost like a journalist, or you're documenting these things. Yeah. I've always wondered, do you hit a point where you're like halfway through or 3/4 of the way through and you're like, my God, this is really good, but I still have 100 pages to go and I'm going to screw it up. Like the Marvel, because I was thinking Marvel movies. What if they got up to the Infinity War movie and everybody loves it, and the Marvel writing room, they're like, we're out of ideas. We don't know what the hell we're gonna do.
Well, that's where Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness comes in.
Yeah.
It's kind of the opposite thing. It's kind of a fear of stopping because I'm worried that there's an article out there or a magazine, some sort of magazine story or some sort of interview that they did for a TV show that I've missed somehow, and it has key information. And as an example of this, the first game show host biography I wrote is Bill Cullen. And a friend of mine, Matt Ottinger, oversees a Bill Cullen website. We're constantly updating it because we've learned so much more stuff about him in the 10 years because we keep digging up all of these interviews that he gave, and we keep digging up TV projects that we didn't know about. We found 2 or 3 unsold pilots that he hosted after that book was published. A member of his family was like going through the attic, and they found the unedited tape of a pre-recorded interview that he did for Good Morning America, which is just Bill teeing off on all things game shows for about 30 minutes, just off the top of his head. And so we just keep finding all this stuff, and it's like, damn, this would have been great for the book.
That's when you do another. You get enough stuff, you do another book.
Yeah.
Do a second edition.
Or you know what you do, Adam, is you release a 10th anniversary edition now with more chapters, and you sell the same twice.
Don't think that hasn't crossed my mind. The other thing that's come up is I've been doing some work for this museum in Rochester, the Strong Museum of Play and the National Archives of Game Show History. Plug. And and one of the things I came across that I didn't have access to before was a scrapbook of newspaper clippings, press clippings about Gene Rayburn.
Yeah.
That I didn't have before. And it was all stuff covering his early radio career, which is completely forgotten. But Gene Rayburn pretty much invented morning drive radio, what we think of. Basically, the John Boy and Billy format was created by Gene Rayburn.
Right.
That chapter of his career is largely forgotten, and I did my best to chronicle it at the time. But here were more newspaper articles and more magazine articles that went into great depth about it in the 1940s.
Yeah.
And I didn't have access to that at the time. So yeah, that's my big problem, is just being afraid to declare that a book is done because what am I missing? Maybe there's something else out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's one of the, some authors need to learn when to stop, because there's a couple of Stephen King books that, I was totally happy with how it ended. Oh wait, there's another chapter, and then I hated the book. So there's that. there's that. Hey, Steve Farrell's on, and he wants to know if you're going to write a book about the Darren Cox story, because I was a game show host in college. My game show was Useless Knowledge. We had 7 episodes. That's enough for a book, right?
Yeah.
Hello.
1 chapter per episode, and then like an index.
A graphic novel or something. Have you ever?
It's a picture book.
Have you ever thought about? Have you ever thought about writing one of these books and then inserting like a chapter or maybe just a few paragraphs of absolute to see if anybody catches it? You know, to point out
like a copyright trap or something.
Yeah, just point out like, and they were an extra on the Lone Ranger, and just see if anybody's ever going to research that. Or
Gene Rayburn had the largest collection of chewed bubblegum in the world. It was like a box that was 7 foot wide, full of chewed bubblegum.
He was the original Boba Fett.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. A lot of people didn't know that.
A lot of people didn't know that.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
Howdy, friends. Are you a southern boy looking for a place that sells all the stuff you need with prices that won't bust your budget and get you butt on down to JD's 24-hour drive-through pawn and gun auto parts pharmaceutical adult gift bait and tackle discount cigarette outlet? We got screen doors, tractor tires, vibrators, moon pies, RC cola, long johns, road maps, guitar strings, whole hog sausage, and an abundant array of unfinished furniture. We got police scanners, shot glasses, Budweiser, Red Man, barbecue grills, Trojan rubber, spark plugs, deer meat, and don't forget our XXX porn movie warehouse. Rent Eddie 7 movies, 7 nights, only $7. Come by every Tuesday night for illegal bingo gambling in our air-conditioned back room, and if you get too drunk to drive, hell, I'll take you home. We don't do it for the money. We do it because, by God, we care. Come visit JD's 24-hour drive-through pawn and gun auto parts pharmaceutical adult gift bait and tackle discount cigarette outlet. Now in our new location down on 11E behind where Old Man Johnson's barn used to be, next to Jill's Affordable Tattooing. Do it today.
JD's, what a southern boy needs.